When I started teaching, I was a horrible teacher. In fact, I don't even know how I was able to keep my job continuously and never get laid off, or I was never let go. I mean, sometimes I would come to school without a plan at all and I would just wing it. And since I was in my 20s when I started, my early 20s, I thought I was invincible. And sometimes I would come to school with barely any sleep, and sometimes with a hangover. Yeah, I learned that lesson really fast. Now, my saving grace was the fact that I knew that I was going to fail a lot, but at the same time, I was going to grow a lot. This, despite the fact that I'm just kind of a perfectionist, but I also knew that the only way that I was going to get better is if I tried and tried again and fell again. I basically approached teaching like a scientist, where I would make a hypothesis about how something was going to go, and then I went ahead and taught the class, or you can call that the experiment, and then I evaluated the results afterwards. And then from those evaluations, then I decided what I was going to do next and how I was going to improve. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing how to take teacher daily struggles and transform them into wins so that you can be a better teacher faster. So of course, something that you could do faster is to quickly hit that like and subscribe button so that you can get more tips and tricks on how to improve your teaching and just feel better about teaching overall. So the first teacher daily struggle that I've had to deal with over the years is being unprepared. Now, this, as I mentioned in the introduction, means coming in without a lesson. Or have you ever had a lesson planned, but you didn't have enough plans? So there was like, say, 15, 20, 30 minutes still left in the class and you had nothing else to do. Or maybe on the flip side, a lesson took longer than you had anticipated, and so you didn't get through everything that you needed to do. So maybe you either just cut it short and didn't teach the rest of the stuff, which could be kind of bad sometimes, or it had to bleed into the next class's lesson. I've had that happen to me many times too. I can tell you for sure that there have been many times over the past 22 years when I would forget on the weekend to plan out what I was going to do for the following week. At that point, I wasn't planning my lessons, 2 or 3 weeks in advance. I was going sometimes day by day, week by week, and I would just have to try to scramble and put something together. And it was really stressful for me, and I would just have to really figure out what I was going to do on the fly. So that's actually the benefit of having been a bad planner in the past and not being prepared, is the fact that I learned how to pivot really quickly. I learned how to flex that muscle where you have to figure out what you're going to do in a matter of seconds before your class falls apart. Because your class knows when you don't have enough prepared, and they know when you don't know what you're going to do next. They understand when there's a lull in the lesson, and it doesn't really take much. Even if you have like the best of classes, it doesn't take much before one person starts to talk to another, and then there's a lot of little mini conversations and the whole class just loses it. But it took failing in this area multiple times to be able to just pivot in the lesson right away. Or if something was thrown at me that I had to teach right away, or let's say that there was a drill that I wasn't prepared for, I was able to think on the fly and know exactly what to do next and not lose my class. And I'm sure you've seen this with other teachers where they just always seem cool and collected no matter what is happening around them. The fire alarm goes off or a student just seems to go crazy. They just seem to know what to do next, even though it's unexpected. How you learn to do that is by failing at being prepared. So this leads me to my next teacher struggle, which is time management. So before, I used to spend so much time looking for lessons or just going through every single step in a lesson and taking notes. And then also when I would grade, I would spend so much time writing feedback, just really detailed feedback that students weren't even reading, or I'd write these long emails to reply to parents or to reply to my colleagues or administration. I just didn't have a good sense of how much time I should spend on each task. And you might be guilty of this because you feel like you had to do everything at 200%. For some teachers, it feels like this rite of passage, or it's just, part of our job to spend hours and hours grading and planning and replying to emails and things like that. But actually, that's not necessarily the norm, nor is it healthy. A lot of the problem that I had, especially in my earlier years of teaching, was that I didn't have a system. I would show up to school and just go through my day, and when my prep would come, I would just kind of sit there and just look around, and the first thing that I saw, that's what I would start working on. But I didn't have a plan so that I knew what to do during my planning time. time, if that makes sense. I just sort of used the time and filled it with whatever came to my mind first. But the problem with that is that you were then leaving yourself open to running out of time and then spending your personal time on school-related things. And we really want to minimize that as much as possible. So the benefit of me going through so many years of wasting time and so many years of spending countless hours outside of school doing school-related work is that I finally figured out some systems. And now I barely take home any work, and I pretty much do the majority of my school-related stuff while I'm in school during school hours. And this is especially important if you have a teaching assignment where you don't have a planning period. You might have to then spend some of your outside time working on school-related stuff so that you don't fall behind. But if you're going to give up an hour of your personal time, you want to make sure that you maximize that. So trying out new systems will really help you figure out what's going to work for you so that you can make the most of the time that you have. The next teacher daily struggle that I've had to deal with for quite some time is planning and teaching a bad lesson. So this is different from the first struggle where I'm unprepared, because this one is where I wrote a bad lesson, or while delivering a lesson, it didn't go so well. Of course, this has happened many, many times, especially when I made that transition from teaching band to teaching English, because breaking down a lesson is very different when you're trying to do reading and writing and grammar and all of that compared to teaching a student how to play an instrument. So it was really hard for me in the beginning. My lessons are really boring. I followed exactly what the textbook told me to do, but the kids could tell that I didn't know what I was doing. And so the way that I delivered my lesson was pretty robotic. Also, sometimes you write a lesson or create materials for the students that don't actually help them learn. And as you're going through it with them and kids aren't getting it, you get really frustrated because you're like, why aren't they understanding this? And then later on, you come to find out after some reflection, it's because the worksheet was bad. Or there were times when I just didn't read the room and I couldn't tell that kids weren't getting it. And so then I would get frustrated when it was time for them to answer out. And I hadn't explained the concept well enough to them in order for them to really be able to work with the concept or to be able to discuss it with each other, and definitely not enough for them to answer out in class. So it took me failing in that way multiple times for me to realize that you do have to check in with the students. You do have to make sure that they're paying attention. Sometimes I talk too much and they're getting really bored, and so much information has just gone over their head because I keep yakking on and on. So then I was able to adjust how I teach so that that doesn't happen anymore and the students stay a lot more engaged. But if I hadn't failed by boring the kids or creating bad materials and bad lessons, I never would have gotten better as a teacher. And this ties in with my next teacher daily struggle, which is bad classroom management. I don't know anyone who has had perfect classroom management from the get-go, or even perfect classroom management at all. We all at some point struggle with classroom management in terms of keeping our kids engaged, keeping them on task, and keeping them from going crazy in class. This past year has definitely been a struggle for so many teachers, but I can tell you guys that I've gone through the gamut of different ways that I've handled classroom management, and in the beginning, a lot of them didn't work. When I started out teaching, I wanted to be the fun teacher because I wanted to be accepted and liked by my students. So I was a little more loose in terms of my rules and implementing my rules, and I was a little too nice to them because I thought that if they liked me, then they would listen to me. I came to find out that this actually doesn't work in the long run. Sure, in the beginning, if students like you, then they're more willing to listen to you. But when they start to get out of hand and you really have to lay down the law because they're being inappropriate or they're not focusing and you can't get through the lesson, now they just look at you like, what's wrong with her? And then they don't want to listen and they resent you. And then I went to the other extreme where I was too strict with them and very unbending and inflexible, and students just didn't like me in general. Now for that, I didn't like that feeling either because I like to interact with the kids. And I also know that when they don't like me, there's always going to be some kid who wants to rebel and not listen to me just for the sake of the fact that he or she doesn't like me. Also, over the years, I learned things like you shouldn't turn your back to the class for very long because that's when all the shenanigans happen, and you also have to just be able to read the room like I was talking about in terms of delivering a lesson. So these are failures that I've had over the years that I'm actually really, really grateful for, because it's made it so that I can keep my class in control but really, really engaged, and we have a good time together. But when it's time to get down to work, they are more than willing to work. There comes a point with time after failing and observing your class that you're going to be able to predict student behaviors before they even happen, and you can do things to avoid anything from even starting up at all. So for example, if you have one student who wants to throw something away and it's across the room, you could be proactive by hand the trash can to them. That way they don't have to go and talk to their friends on the way there. Things like that. The next teacher daily struggle, dealing with parents. Now, I'm going to make a whole nother video about how to deal with parents and how to best be proactive with them as well. But this is something that also took some time, and actually it didn't really hit me how to do this very well until I myself became a parent. In the beginning, when you get emails from parents that are upset about something that you said or that you did or something that's happening in class, or complaining about a student's grade, we can get defensive because we feel like we're being personally attacked. But I found after a while that they're not exactly attacking me as much as they're trying to help out their student. So, if they feel like their student is being picked on by you, then what they're trying to do is defend their student. They're trying to stand up for their child. And yes, it may feel like it's an attack on you, but what they really want is for their student to not be picked on anymore. Same thing, let's say that they're being bullied in class and the parent feels like you're not doing anything about it. What they really want is for their child to not be bullied. So after a while of reading these emails or having discussions with parents, I finally realized that I had to look at the situation from their eyes. Now, I can't control what kind of parent they are, how much they enforce consequences or anything like that at home. The only thing that I control is how I react to the parents. And I found that the less reactive and defensive that I am, then the better the situation ends up. I also learned that starting out the year really warm and communicating with the parents as much as possible makes it so that parents aren't in the dark and they don't feel caught off guard. Granted, not all parents will read the emails or the messages that you send out, but at least you can say that you did communicate with them. And so when they come back to you or your principal is saying, I didn't know about this, you can tell them exactly when you informed them about it, and it's really on them if they didn't get the message. But I've had my share of angry parents sending emails or messages, parent conferences, and honestly, I know that they just want to work things out and they just want to be heard, but I personally don't want to even have to bother with them. I don't want to be hassled, so I do everything in my power to just not have angry parents. Something that I just learned along the way. Now, similarly, I've had my share of bad administrators and not so great colleagues. And I'm sure that you're already in this situation. It would be great if all of the administrators out there and all of our colleagues were just amazing, positive teachers who are just looking out for the kids and not for their own interest. It would just be so harmonious, but we know that that's not really how it works. I mean, a school runs just like it does any other business in terms of having people who are at the top and the rest of us who aren't, and we just have to deal with a lot of weird personalities. Have you seen The Office? Just because we're in a school, that doesn't mean that office politics doesn't happen in our schools. And so learning how to navigate that has been something that I've had to really work on, because I tend to be a little more meek and I tend to be someone who just kind of like lets other people get away with things. And after a while, I learned that I was resenting them, and it was affecting how I showed up in school as a leader and how I showed up for my students as well. So one thing that I've learned is how to be diplomatic and really work with my administrator, whether or not I like them. In fact, there's been quite a few administrators that I didn't like, but all of them like me. Does that mean I kiss their butt? No, but I do want to have a working relationship with them. I do want them to think favorably of me, because that way when I need something that is going to benefit my students or benefit my department or benefit the school, they are more willing to listen to me. If you constantly attack or confront or do anything negative like that with your administrator, whether it's the principal or assistant principal, they are going to be on the defensive and they're less likely to want to work with you, even though it's something that could benefit lots of people. I've learned, not necessarily through my own experience, but from observing some of my colleagues, that the more confrontational you are with administration, the less you can actually accomplish or get away with at school. And finally, the teacher daily struggle that I actually struggle with a little less now is stress. The biggest lesson that I've learned in terms of stress is that you just want to focus on the things that you can control and affect. So I've spent all kinds of time worrying about all kinds of things, my students and their home life, colleagues who are being great teachers or not so great teachers, or administrators who I feel like are being vindictive or aren't running the show right. I mean, there's so many things that could stress you out at school, test scores, things like that, but I can only focus and control the things that are within my sphere. So that's what I worry about. I only worry about the things that I can personally affect and control. So if a parent doesn't like me through maybe no fault of my own, or even if it is something that I did, I can't change that. I can't worry about that. I can just try to be as diplomatic as I can, but at the end of the day, if they don't like me, they don't like me. Same thing with a student. If a student doesn't like me, that's fine. I'm not going to be hurt about it just because they don't like me, but I am going to just focus on the students who do like me. And when that student that doesn't like me, if they don't interact in a positive way with me, I'm not going to treat them any differently because they're just a kid, right? I'm not going to sit there and take it personally. Now, there have been colleagues throughout the years that I haven't appreciated. And what do I do when I see them? Do I scowl in their face? Do I get all up in their face about something that they said or did? No, I'm pleasant with them. It's not that I'm being two-faced, it's that I don't see a point in being unpleasant with them. What is that going to accomplish? If I'm trying to change them or try to change the way they act or think, then I shouldn't hold my breath, because you can't change people. But I can change myself. I can control how I react to them. And that has just made school a lot less stressful for me. If students don't do so well on an assessment and my administrator comes and talks to me about it because they should have done better, I'm not going to get upset at the students. I'm not going to get upset at my administrator. I'm just going to try to do better next time. And that's all that I can do. And if the administrator doesn't appreciate that or doesn't like it, then I can go. Or I can suck it up and stay. The one thing though that I do sometimes get sucked up into is just drama. I don't know why I hear about drama or I get sucked up into drama. I actually mentioned that in a video about how things have been really hard for me lately, because sometimes I do get sucked up into that, politics at school, and that's the kind of stuff that stresses me out. And I really should just be sitting back and relaxing and not worrying about it, because a lot of times the things that cause the drama, they have nothing to do with me. So why am I getting stressed out? So I'm sure that you're struggling with some of these, and maybe you're wondering, is there something wrong with me? Is it going to get better? There's nothing wrong with you. We all go through this, and we all have to learn the hard way how to get through it. But just know that as long as you're learning from it, and you're getting better and you're growing, things are going to get easier and you're going to become an amazing teacher. You just have to believe that there's a reason why this is happening for you or happening to you. And then you just got to move forward and do better. Now, if you're going through all of these struggles and you're just like, I can't handle school and it's just too tough for me, I can relate. Check out this video next so that you can hear about how I've been personally struggling this past year and how I intend to make it better moving forward.